Okie dokie. Thank you everyone for joining the Patient Summary FHIR IG call for the 15th of May. My name is Steve Swinsberg and I'll be your host for today. So first up, our acknowledgement of country. So HL7 Australia acknowledges and pays respect to the past, present and future traditional custodians and elders of Australia and the continuation of cultural, spiritual and educational practices of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Our agenda for today is, so we'll go through the usual business around the approval of minutes from the last meeting, and some updates and news for things that are coming up. Next up, we have Dushi talking about the AUPS actors and progressing them through to a FMM2 status. And then we have a couple of remaining ballot reconciliation items. So Dushi and Michael will be going through those tickets there, and hopefully we'll be getting those sorted out for the reconciliation period. And then I'll have a little chat about the next meeting agenda. Okay, so usual business. So there's only one item, and that is the approval of minutes from our last meeting, which was on the 1st of May, the Patient Summary FHIR IG call. So those were sent out. Does anyone have any questions on those or any other feedback? Otherwise, we can move to, thanks, Shelley. She's put a link in the chat. Yeah, otherwise we can move to have those accepted.
Steve, do you just want to maybe just share the screen? Just go to it
Yeah,
just so we can have a quick look, make sure everything.
yeah, 100%. Can you still see that? Yeah,
Yeah, looks good.
cool. So, yeah, we got our attendees, we've got the recordings and the notes there. Yeah, one of the big items was the must support obligations when there's multiple cardinality. So that was a good discussion there. A bit of a walkthrough of the current state, well, the status back then of the QA HTML file from the IG build. Um, yeah, a couple of other discussion items. So if there's no one, can't see anyone with their hand raised, so let's have a crack at where do I find this?
We need a motion in a second.
Oh, we need a motion. Okay, would someone like to motion that?
I'll motion.
Great. So you're motioning for the acceptance of the meetings of the
Yep.
meeting. Yep. Is there a seconder?
I'll second it. It's Chris Miser.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Okay, I'll launch a poll. Approval of minutes. Okay, so hopefully that's on your screen now. Thanks, Michael, in the chat. 77%. 83 plus. I think the other attendees actually gets us to everyone. So count that down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we'll end that. Okay, so I'll share those results. So we have 67% affirmative and 33% abstain, plus an extra one from Michael in the chat. So those have now passed. Thank you.
So you just want to
So,
read the numbers for the minutes?
oh yeah, sure. So affirmative, we have 10 out of 15.
Plus one in the
Negative,
chat. Sorry.
plus one in the chat. Yep, you're right. Plus, sorry, then negative was 0, and abstain was 5 out of 15. Cool. Alrighty, moving along. Go back to my sharing. Okay, updates and news. So we have the Spark testing event coming up on the 8th of July in Brisbane. This is a one-day event. And it's a testing event specifically for, well, it's actually for all of the different streams that we've got, which is awesome. So AU Core, AU Patient Summary, AU e-requesting, Smart Forms, and also the Health Connect Australia Provider Directory. So that IG has just been finalised, and there will be a test server there for that as well, because I am running that one. So this is a good opportunity for connecting between systems, different scenarios across the FHIR IGs, and will be a good event to get some coverage of those FHIR IGs and the different elements. There'll be various opportunities for submitting test results and things like that, and actually having a good go at using the IG and various servers that implement those IGs. So the Rego form is there on the screen in a QR code. Shelley has also posted in the chat the links to the directly to the event page for the event, and also the Rego form on Typeform to sign up. And there's also some FAQs there as well for what happens at a test event, and how we can get good test coverage across the IGs, because it's really important that we get that test coverage so that we can progress those through the different maturity levels. Okie doke. That is all the news that I had, and so now we'll hand over to Dushi to talk about the AUPS actors and the AFMM2 status. Would you like
Thanks. Thanks,
me to
Steve.
keep sharing?
I'll share if that's
Okay.
okay. It's easier
No
to
worries.
navigate. So I'm not sure if you need to stop sharing first.
I will stop sharing them, and
Okay, I
I'm
think I'm
able.
sharing my screen now. Can you see
Yeah.
my screen?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you. So today is about seeking AFMM2 endorsement for the two AUPS actors, the consumer and the producer. I think we are all familiar with AFMM levels, as we worked with those for over a year now, or even more. So we start as draft, and then we move through FMM1 through the ballot process, and progressing through FMM2 through different testing activities like connectathons and testing events. At this point, most of AU patient summary artifacts are already reached the FMM2. And today we'll be looking at two that meet that criteria, the two vector definitions. So for AFMM2, the key requirements are that at least 3 independently developed systems have tested most of the artifact scope using realistic data and scenarios, and the results have been reported and accepted by the FHIR group. So we look at the numbers now. So for the consumer actor, we assessed 5 requirements, and we have evidence from 8 systems testing 4 out of those 5, which gives us 80% coverage. And for the producer, we have 7 requirements, and we had 12 systems testing 6 out of those 7, which gives us 86% coverage. So these requirements come directly from the actor definition. So each top level shall or should was counted as one track requirement, but we'll look at that soon. I'd just like to note one thing before we go any further, that AUPS doesn't define any capability standards for these actors. So there is no separate capability requirements to test. So the actual test testable conformance lives in the actor definition requirements themselves and in the profile obligations that reference those actors. So those are things like mass support handling for AUPS bundles and composition elements. So let's look at the consumer actor. So consumer actor has 5 tracked requirements. And as I said, each top level shell requirement is tracked as one testable requirement. So I'll go through these quickly and flag what's been done so far, what testing evidence we have, and where we identify the gaps in testing. So the first 2 requirements, implementing the AUPS bundle, AUPS composition, and AUPS patient profiles, and handling the profiles in the mandatory sections, problems, allergies, and medications. We counted these as met. So we have clear evidence of systems consuming AUPS documents with these profiles and sections in them. The third requirement, handling all the profiles in the recommended sections. This is one of the gaps for consumers. So this is a shell in the actor definition, and we don't really have enough evidence across all recommended section profiles. So things like observation results, radiology, and device use statements have not been fully covered. So this requirement is not fully tested, and we actually identified this as something where we need additional testing done. The fourth one, the obligation requirement, implementing AUPS consumer obligations in the profiles. This isn't really tested separately. It's evidenced through the profile level testing. Did consumer systems handle AUPS content and must support elements in those documents we received? So we counted this as a met requirement. And then the last one, the actor definition, has a shell that says the consumer must support elements populated in accordance with guidance that's documented in missing data, empty sections, known absence of data, no known X or suppressed data section. We have good testing evidence for missing data, empty sections, no known X, and suppressed data. We don't have evidence for known absence of data yet, but I think it's important to note that this guidance on known absence of data is a should, not shall level. So even though it's a shall in the actor definition, pointing to the guidance, this doesn't override the conformance requirement that's specified in the guidance. So this really is a gap in the should level evidence. It doesn't affect whether this requirement is counted as met or not. And we have noted this as an area of additional testing, but it doesn't change the overall count. Before I go on to the next slide, are there any questions about this one? Okay. I'll go into producer now. So the producer has 7 requirements. Most of the logic is the same as the consumer, so I'll just point out where there are differences. So for producers, the recommended sections are actually should, not shall. So we don't have, same as consumers, we don't have enough coverage there either for things like device use statement and radiology results. But because it's a should, it's not counted the same way as a missing shall. So it's this, we listed this as a met requirement and also noted as something that's useful additional testing to collect. One gap, though, that we have for producers is suppressed data. We didn't have enough producers testing suppressed data. I think we only have evidence from 2 systems. So that's not met, clearly. And then everything else, core profiles, mandatory sections, obligations in implemented profiles, missing data, empty sections, requirements, that's all counted and met based on generated AUPS documents that we tested between systems. So that's pretty much how we got to numbers. all of this or detailed evidence is documented in the FHIR IG testing page, but I'll stop here again to ask if there are any questions before I go to that page. Okay. So if can everyone see the page? Sorry, the patient summary FHIR IG testing.
We're just seeing your slides, Dushi.
My slides, okay. Let me try that again. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Okay. So again, I think everyone's pretty much familiar with this page. I think this is where we document all the testing evidence, who tested what, when. It's kept pretty much up to date. So we've got a list of systems that were involved in testing and the coverage, and then the total numbers or coverage against the FMM2 criteria. But what I wanted to point out is this table documenting additional testing desired. So here we've got some documented additional testing that we need for consumer and producer actors. But these are not really separate actor requirements that we missed. So these are pretty much the area that we know that testing is required, and mostly tied to recommended sections and optional bundle references that are already tracked under AUPS composition requirements. So we know we don't have enough evidence for AUPS composition. And that really flows into actor testing. So the actor additional requirements really point back to this rather than duplicating or posing additional requirements that we need tested. And then we do have some additional requirements or additional testing needed around known absence of data due to workflow. This is actually something that we identified as the area where we didn't really have test data for. So we'll be creating test data for those very soon. And then, as I said, we need more producers to test suppressed data. So are there any questions about this page, or would anyone like me to go into more detail and look at what's been tested and who tested what and when? Okay, I will go back to, sorry.
Sorry, quick question. Is it possible to have a link to that page in the chat?
Yes.
Thank you.
No worries. Shelley, are you okay to put that in the chat?
Yeah, it's already in there. If you have a look in the chat, it's got linked to Confluence testing page. That's the one there. Just let me know if it doesn't work.
Thank you.
Would you mind posting it again? Sorry, I had to leave and come back, so I can't see the chat history.
We will do that.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. Thanks, Shelley. All right, so the last slide. Oops, sorry, gotten one too far. So the last slide, this is actually the JIRA ticket that's asking for endorsement of FMM2 for AUPS consumer and AUPS producer. And as we just looked at, we think the AFMM2 criteria is met. Both artifacts are at AFMM2, and we have at least 3 independent systems tested, with most of the actor scope covered. So are there any questions about this JIRA ticket? And if not, I'd like to move to make a motion.
So one question, the fact that we haven't got the suppressed data, does that impact the fact that we can or can't go to AFMM2? Or are we just saying that because on balance, the majority of things are met, therefore we're still good to go?
Yeah, we do have enough suppressed data evidence for consumers. We only have 2 systems testing suppressed data on the producer side. So I think, yeah, as you said, on the balance, this is one of the requirements that's not met. But yeah, we still meet the over 80% mark, 80% coverage mark for the artifact.
No worries. Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, then if there are no questions, I would like to move to endorse AFMM2 for the AUPS consumer and the AUPS producer actors.
Okay, thanks, Juicy. Do we have a seconder for that motion?
Marvin, I'm happy to second.
Awesome, thanks, Marvin. Okie doke. Well, let's launch a poll for that one. So let's find the right one for current motion launch. Okie dokie. So it should be a poll on your screen for that motion, and that is that the AUPS actors move to AFMM2.
I've added one in the chat as well.
Yep, got you one in the chat. Thanks. I think that's actually everyone now. So I will end that. I'll give you another 5 seconds if there is one left. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. All right, so I'll end that poll. Okay, so the results, I'll just share those. So the results, we had 16 out of 20, so 80% affirmative +1, so 17 out of 20. And then we had 4 people abstaining. I think those numbers are skewed when we take into account co-hosts and things. So that's fine. Great, so that one's passed. Thanks, Dishy.
Thank you. I will stop sharing. Oh, actually, I'll stop sharing now. Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. I will start sharing again then.
Actually, Steve, I can share. I'm going to do the next bit.
Yep, you're the next bit anyway, so I'll just hand it over to you. Thanks.
Yep. Just get that sorted. Hopefully you can see that now.
Yep, got that on screen.
Okay. So I'm going to give a quick ballot update. This is just for anyone who this might be their first call. I haven't been with us through ballot for the moment, but just a quick recap saying that balloting is the formal HL7 process that is used for feedback on specifications prior to publication. We're looking to publish Patient Summary as a working standard, so we've been through that ballot process. There's a whole set of rules that HL7 Australia has set up around balloting, and there's some links here about the Governance Operations Manual, balloting processes and decision-making practices in our bylaws. So that binds us through this balloting process. The role of the work group here. So we've been to ballot, we've got feedback on issues. The co-chairs have triaged those issues, prepared draft dispositions to bring to the work group. And so now here in the work groups, our work group members work on the resolutions and vote to make decisions on those dispositions. So that's what we're doing here today. We're looking at the draft resolutions. We're deciding whether we accept those or not as a work group, and we'll vote on them and to complete them. When we're voting, we will decide the type of resolution we want from this, whether it's considered for future use, which is something that we think we need to look at further, but we're not ready to make a decision on yet. So we would defer that one. We can say they're persuasive, where we accept the change as it was proposed. Persuasive with modification, where we accept the change, but we might make some minor adjustments to the proposed resolution. Not persuasive, we won't be making a change. We don't think the change is warranted. And then not persuasive with modification, which is an interesting one, which is saying we don't think that the change is required, but we might make a modification to the spec to make something a bit clearer, a bit easier to understand so that people don't misunderstand what the specification is trying to say. And then we've just got duplicate and retracted, which are ones where there's obvious duplicates or they've been removed. So where are we at with the ballot process at the moment? So the ballot period has completed. We've been doing ballot resolution for the last couple of months. We're getting to the end of that period, which will end at the end of May, and then we'll look to publish the first release of patient summary in June. I think that says July, but I think we'll actually, oh, sorry, it is right. It will be in July. That's right. We actually, from the ballot itself, the ballot votes, we had 34 affirmative and 11 negative, which actually gave us a 75% pass rate. We only needed 60, so we actually we have the right to publish, but as we will certainly we still go through all the ballot issues and resolve them prior to publication. But otherwise, we have endorsement to publish. So where are we? So we've had a number of meetings already for ballot resolution. You can see those ones in green are ones that we've completed. They're the number of issues that we have resolved in each of those meetings. So we've had a good number there. We're now here on the 15th of May. We've got 3 ballot issues remaining to resolve now. Then we have a meeting on the 29th of May, which actually falls very close the day after our Spark community workshops that are being held in Brisbane. So depending on how we go today, we might want to cancel that meeting, or we may want to move it. We've still got a number of issues to resolve. So we'll come back to that at the end of today's meeting to see whether we want to hold that. And then we've essentially got the 12th of June is last changes. So if there's any other changes that we need to get into patient summary before publication, that is our last opportunity. And then we'll just do some administration around making sure our QA report is okay and any final sort of steps before we look to publish in July. So with that, we're going to move into ballot reconciliation. I think Dushi's going to take us through the first issue. Dushi, did you want to share, or do you want me to?
I can share.
Yep.
Because I think we need to navigate between the slide pack and the IG.
Yep.
So I will grab the screen. Okay, can everyone see that? The ballot reconciliation screen?
Yep.
Yep.
All right,
All
thank
good.
you. Okay, so this is the first issue. Provide the list of additional requirements that AUPS profiles expect compared with IPS profiles. So this issue was actually raised against 2 pages in the IG, the comparison with other national and international IGs, and AU variance statements page, or the variance from IPS statement section on that page. So the feedback is actually, while the specification explains that AUPS is compliant with IPS, and that introduces additional Australian requirement, it's not immediately clear what those requirements are and where they're documented, and what the reverse compliance expectations are. So for example, can a valid IPS instance fail validation against AUPS? Can the AUPS consumer consume all valid IPS instances, and where are the AUPS specific requirements documented in the spec? So the ticket, or the comment suggests 2 changes to add a section to the comparison with other national and international IGs. Requirements, and this section would explicitly list all AUPS additional requirements related to IPS, and second, to update the variance statement from IPS wording to clarify that while IUPS instances are compliant with AUPS, a valid IPS instance may still fail validation against AUPS because of the additional AUPS requirements. So I'll quickly go to those pages in the IG just to show you. I think I might do it this way. Can you see my screen now? The comparison with other national and international IGs page?
Yeah.
Do I need to make that a little bit bigger? Is that better?
Yeah, that's probably a bit better. Thanks, Tishy.
All right. So I think we've all seen this page before. It provides broader comparison information between profiles in AUPS and other IG implementation guides, including IPS. So the comparison is done from AUPS profiles to profiles in these other implementation guides and identifies where those compared profiles have additional requirements and what they are. The page actually does address the reverse compliance expectations to some extent, because we do say this, that compliance in reverse direction is not guaranteed, i.e. a resource that's compliant with an international patient summary, may not be compliant with AUPS, but it doesn't provide a list of detailed additional requirements in AUPS like we do that for other IGs and going from AUP patient summary to these other implementation guides. The other page that's referenced in the issue is the variance statement page, and in particular variance from IPS. So the feedback noted that the page states there is no variance from IPS, and it states that AUPS imposes additional requirements, and the issue suggests that it would be helpful to clarify what those additional requirements are and to update the wording on this page to better explain compliance expectations for IPS instances when validating against AUPS. So I'll go back to the go back to the slide back. So the proposed disposition for this is not persuasive for a number of reasons. The first reason is that we already have a page in the AUPS, that talks about additional requirements in AUPS. So some of the additional requirements on identifiers and terminology bindings and cardinalities are addressed in this localization of the IPS section, but it is high level. It doesn't go into the level that was asked on this ticket. So overall, it's not like the AUPS implementation guide doesn't have any of the requested information. It's just that that information exists, but it exists in a couple of places and not to the level that was asked for. What was asked for was much more detailed comparison, covering things like additional profile requirements and actor requirements and things like missing data and empty section handling and suppressed data. So the proposed resolution is that adding this detailed comparison is deferred, and the rationale for that is that the amount of work involved versus the additional value provided in the first release of AU Patient Summary. So the proposal is to create a new deferred backlog item for a more detailed comparison to be added to the IG in a future release. We also propose not to update the variance page. The rationale for that is that the purpose of the variance page is specifically to identify formal variants from the base implementation guide in accordance with HL7AU Australia variance requirements. HL7 Australia variance requirements. And the page is also using the language that's described in the variance requirements document. So the purpose of the variance page is not to document all additional AUPS constraints. It's not about assessing reverse compliant expectations. Those are actually being addressed elsewhere in the specification, like the comparison page. It's also not unique to IPS. So all of these forward and reverse compliance questions exist in other Australian specifications, like, for example, AU Core relative to AU Base and AU requesting relative to AU Core and AU Base. So this is something it's proposed that this is something that should be raised with as feedback to HL7 Australia about whether these compliance relationships should be explained more consistently across all Australian specifications. I'll stop here for any questions or comments about this JIRA ticket.
Yeah, Michael's got his hand up.
Yes.
Thanks, Tushi. I was just going to explain my understanding of this issue. So the way I see it is that we have an Australian patient summary, and that is conformant with an international patient summary, an IPS. So, and that's what our pages are saying, that essentially that we're conformant with these things, and we're conformant with AU core, and we're conformant with AU base, and all of those things. I think where Heath has raised this is from the other side, saying if you have an international patient summary, it doesn't mean it's conformant with an Australian patient summary, because we have additional requirements on top of that, which is exactly what we're doing. We're localizing it, so we're adding additional. So I think that's what Heath was looking to have, was those differences. But essentially that is the IG. I mean, the IG is showing all the differences. So yeah, that was my understanding and how I sort of understood what he was asking for. But I think the proposed disposition is right, because that's not how we normally do it. I mean, we have downstream IGs, and that's exactly what they're doing. They're inheriting from the upstream IG, then they're adding additional constraints, additional requirements on top of it. So they're not backward compatible, right? So, I mean, you can't expect another like IPS to be compatible with AUPS because we're adding additional constraints. That is exactly what we're doing. But the other way around it works, where an AUPS is also conformant with an IPS.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. That's much better summary than what I provided. I'll just say that he's away at Rotterdam at the moment, but we did discuss this with him, and he has agreed with this resolution. So he's happy with not adding this content to the IG now and deferring it to the later release. Any other comments or questions? Okay, then I will then make a motion to accept this JIRA as not persuasive with the resolution displayed on the screen. And I'm happy to make an action of me to raise a new JIRA for the backlog for the addition of the detailed comparison section in a later release.
Cool. I'm happy to second that. Landon Riley.
Thanks, Landon.
Thanks for that. I will launch a poll then. Relaunch the poll. Okay, that should be on your screen now for that motion.
I'm in the chat.
Yep. Great. Okay, I think that is everyone, but I'll do a countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, one just got in. Okay, so I'll end that poll now. Okay, so the results of that poll. So we had 91% affirmative, so that's 20 votes, and 9% of people abstained, so that's 2 votes. So that motion has passed. Thanks, Dushi.
Thanks, Steve. I'll stop sharing now.
I've got the next one. So
Okay.
I'll share.
Yeah. Do you want to take over, Michael? Yeah, thanks.
Yep. Have you got my screen now? No?
Yep.
Yes, we can
Yep.
see it.
I do. Yep.
That's fine.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to do my best to work through the next two, but Dushi or anyone else, please jump in if I'm getting things wrong. So this is another issue that was raised by Heath, and it's a reasonably complex one, so I'll do my best, but definitely ask me if you've got any questions as we go. It is reasonably complex. So this is about the no known X section in our IG. So I'll actually jump to that. I'll put it in the chat. Lost. Maybe Shelley, you might be able to put that in the chat for me. I've lost my window. But and I'll probably zoom in, you probably can't see it enough. So we have a no known X section in the FHIR IG. And this is about where systems can set a no known, all right? So no known conditions, no history of cardiovascular disease. And what this guidance is really saying, that we should be looking at populating the composition section. So the section for the appropriate section that we have that we're trying to populate, and put an entry in there that then has a code that is applicable for the no known X, whatever is not known. And the point here, the guidance really here is to say that we're doing this is the preferred approach as opposed to saying an empty reason in the section. So in a patient summary, we have a number of sections, and one option is you could put an empty reason to say this section is empty for this reason. But our preferred approach to patient summary is actually to put a resource in that section and then assign a code to that resource to say that there's no known allergies, for example. And this example, that's the no known allergy we've got up here. Or this example here, we'd add a condition, and this condition is no current problems or disability. So this is really just the guidance to say that this is the preferred approach that we want to implement in patient summary. So the jury's been raised on this section, and there's a lot of words here, but it's talking about, we have an example of no known conditions. However, the recommended code in AU core condition is no current problems. So rather than no known conditions, there's no current problems. So the suggestion is that this is updated to align with the concept of no current problems, and that the heading should be changed from no known problems to no current problems. Then it talks about the second example here, which is no history of X, for example, no history of cardiovascular system disease. However, this is not specifically addressed in the condition profile. It's not referenced to the IPA guidance. So he's looking for some more clarity around that, and potentially he's kind of asking why we've got that in there, and then asking whether the guidance is intended to go beyond just a known absent section guidance, and basically suggesting to remove that negation from the known X section and leave it only with the AU core profile guidance. So I'll try and break that down because that's a lot of words and a lot of things brought up. So what I've got here on this slide is at the top here, we've got an extract from the AU patient summary no known X section. Then I've got an extract from the AU core condition profile. And then I've got an extract from the AU core allergy intolerance profile. So just to show some consistency here of what we've got. So in the AUPS, we're talking about where the system can assert no known X, for example, no known conditions or no history. The system should populate the section entry, right? And that no known conditions aligns with that guidance in AU core condition, where it talks about indicating no known conditions. The condition code should use the SNOMED CT code, no current problems or disability. So you can see the guidance there is the same, that the guidance in saying no known conditions, it's just the code that actually has no current problems in it. But the way the guidance is written is similar. Then on the other part that's got, for example, to represent a patient does not have an allergy or carry an appropriate negation code, no known allergy, is used in allergy intolerance as per the profile specific implementation guide. That's a straight copy and paste from AU Core allergy intolerance. I suppose the other part of this was back on the guidance here was talking about, for example, no history of cardiovascular system disease, that we don't have any specific guidance tied to that, but it is just an example that we've put in there as an additional example. Questions on that before I move to the resolution? Do we have a basic understanding of what Heath was talking about here, or do we want to go into any of this a bit more?
Sorry. I just wanted...
No, you go.
Sorry. I just wanted to explore a bit. Would there be any impact on patients if the word disability is sort of not there? I mean, would it be, does that lose some important information about the person presenting, or is it just a semantic thing?
So this is the SNOMED code. So that's a code. So we're using that.
I was just curious, why disability is in there, because I think you can have a disability, but that's presenting, like if you've broken your arm, but you don't have a history of anything because it's you know what I mean? I was just curious if there's anything that would be lost. Does it meant to be no current problems and no current disability? I don't know. I just thought I would raise, was there any patient impact on the change? And any data loss that might be valuable.
Is anyone else on the call who might be able to answer that? Certainly not something I can answer.
Sorry, I'm just going to jump in. Can you hear me, Tim?
Yep.
I'm Jeff Ewan from WA Health and deal with a lot of these codes around allergies. And what we call these different conditions, it says, I don't have a condition, or I don't have an active condition. And the SNOMED codes that we use to clarify it, or I didn't check the condition, or I'm not going to provide you any information about the condition. Those exception values around the state of the data. The other thing that needs to be catered for is recording data when I'm confirming that they don't have an active condition, like your bottom one where you've got no known hevia brasiliensis, the latex allergy, that delisting or recording that an allergy requires a separate code, because I can't use the existing code for that allergy, because my health record will correct it if it ever gets passed to it, because they'll just take the code and apply the common description to it and correct it automatically. But they're the issues that we have. Did you check the allergies or the problem list? Are you talking about active problems, past medical history problems, in terms of how we communicate the data? I don't know whether you need to define it in this, but just have a series of overriding guidance that says, what are you actually doing? Are you doing like a positive negative? Because I can't pass through, for example, a negative allergy, because it'll be marked as inactive, and that won't go through to menu systems to tell them that they don't have the allergy. And you're handling situations where patients may tell you that they have an allergy when they've confirmed that they're not. So they are unreliable historians. So I just throw that into the mix, that in this approach, I think if you become over prescriptive, you'll just tie yourself into a corner.
And this is just guidance. And I mean, the key point here in patient summary is it is deferring to the AU core guidance. And the AU core guidance here is saying use an appropriate negation code, and then has an example, right? So it is definitely not prescriptive. It's just saying that use the appropriate one for what you're doing. And the key point here in patient summary is really that guidance, that the focus here is on that there are different approaches, you could say, no known in a patient summary. And one is to say this section is empty for a reason. And the other one is to add a resource like condition, which has the code in it to say that it's the negation code, right? To say there isn't any. So that's the point of the patient summary guidance. And it is just linking to the AE core guidance, which is fairly generic and is just providing some examples of how to do that. So it's definitely not locking you into anything. It's just providing the guidance on how you would do it.
And look, and that's fine in terms of what gets persisted, but said some of the discussions seem to be going is it's going to come down to what the clinician did on the day.
Yeah,
did they
absolutely.
check? Did they check? Did they not check? Hand on heart, was there nothing, etc.
Yeah, I think this is really saying it is empty for a reason, right? As opposed to, I don't know, did you have any data or did you not? It's really trying to be a proactive statement to say that I know this is empty for a reason.
Okay. And that in the older, not in this FHIR stack, but in the other previous codes that we've been using for the CDA documents that goes up to my health record, you had those exception codes to describe why was it a definitive nothing, as opposed to I didn't check or I'm just not giving it to you for some reason. Right.
Right.
I think it's also that this nothing is actually a something, right? Because it's you're actually stating something as an entry.
Right.
So it's not a data question. It's actually an assertion of clinical note, I think. So it's
Well, look,
so I think
we're all right, and the problem is if it's a definitive no, then you have a code for saying there is nothing, because that's a correct answer, as opposed to other statements of why didn't I give you something?
I might just move on to the disposition, the proposed disposition of this. Now, Heath raised this issue. Heath has seen this disposition and he is okay with it. So it has been discussed with him because he's in Rotterdam at the moment with the next one. So the key here is we're saying it's not persuasive, so we're not planning on making any changes. And to address the first point that we're saying, it's not persuasive to add current. So he wanted us to change some of the wording to current. As this approach for problems is the same as for allergies and medications, and the term current is not used. So in our AE core guidance, we're not using current. It's understood that statement is current in a particular time, but the phrasing needs to be consistent with no known allergies, no known medications, and the use of the term no known problems in the FHIR standard guidance. And we're just trying to align with that. The AE core guidance is linked from the condition profile and adopted in AU patient summary. It does not use current. It also refers to using condition resource to represent no history of a particular condition. The guidance in FHIR standard that has been adopted in AE core and subsequently AU patient summary also does not use current. So there are multiple no history concepts available in SNOMED that can be used, including no history of cardiovascular system disease. So it is a valid example. These examples are consistent with the guidance adopted and are considered useful by the community to have in line within the section. So essentially here, we're saying that we don't think we need to make any changes to this section. That is okay as it is. It's consistent with AU core and the FHIR specification. And that the changes he suggested that we don't think we need to have. Like I said, Heath has seen this. He is comfortable with this. But open to any other questions about this resolution. All right. There's no other questions. I'd like to make a motion that we accept this proposed disposition is not persuasive for this issue.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Is there a seconder for that motion?
Brett, you're on second.
Seconding.
I think Brett got in
Oh,
first?
no, he
Yeah.
didn't.
Sorry, Tim. Okay, so all right, thanks. I'll launch the poll for that one. Vote for current motion. Okay, it should be on screen now. Please cast your votes.
Plus one in the chat.
Yeah. Okay, we have most people voted now. We're past 83%. So I'll do a countdown. This one, excuse me, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I will end the poll. Okay, so we have that as share of the results. So we've got 90% affirmative, so that's 19 votes out of 21, and 2 abstaining, 2 out of 21. Actually, including Michael and Bo on the chat. So, yeah, so 21 and 2 abstains. So thank you. That motion is passed.
Okay, thanks.
Excellent.
I'll move on to the next one. Okay, so this one has been raised, and this is actually a good one. We got this international feedback on our specification. So this has come from outside of Australia, which is good that they're having a look at what we're doing and how we're developing our AU patient summary. So the issue raised here was that consider deriving the AU patient summary composition from the FHIR clinical document composition profile. Using this profile as a base would increase structural consistency across national patient summary implementations aligned with the IPS, while leveraging decades of implementation experience from widely deployed HL7 clinical document CDA architecture. Applied clinical document specification provides a canonical representation of clinical documents in FHIR as intended as a common starting point for FHIR-based clinical document specifications and for organisations transitioning from CDA-based document exchange. Additionally, many IPS stakeholders intend for the future IPS versions to derive from the FHIR clinical document specification. Aligning AUPS with this approach now would position the guidance for smoother future IPS alignment and improved interoperability across national implementation. So give a little bit of background on that. So there is a FHIR document specification, clinical document specification. Found my chat window. Start. And as it explained, that essentially this has been built as a way to transition from CDA to FHIR and is an IG to represent clinical documents in FHIR. So the idea, I think it talks about here, that today there are more than 257 existing profiles on bundle and more than 180 on composition, and many of them represent clinical documents, which take different approaches to representing the information structures of a clinical document. So CDA has been widely implemented, and then this is looking at having a consistent way in FHIR to do clinical documents. So that's the point of this IG. And if you have a look at the artifacts and their profiles, you'll see there are only 2 resource profiles. There's a clinical document bundle and a clinical document composition profile. And the composition, and you'll see here there's a set of constraints and requirements, must supports and the like to set this to try and make them consistent. So the reason this issue was actually raised is because there is another IG being developed at the moment and going to Ballot, which I'll also put in the chat, which is the United States Patient Care Summary, US PCS Implementation Guide. Now, this is the US implementation of an international patient summary. So they're working on that at the moment and developing their own localized patient summary. And within here, within their profiles, they have a composition And you'll see in here that they are deriving from a clinical document composition. So they've decided to take the approach of deriving their IPS document from that FHIR clinical document. And that's different to the way that we are doing it. You'll see on our profiles and extensions, we have an AU PS composition. And in here, we are deriving from AU base composition. But what we are also saying that the AU patient summary composition complies with the IPS composition profile. So essentially we're conformant with that. Going a long way around, but the IPS composition also just derives from the base FHIR composition profile. So currently IPS does not derive from the FHIR clinical document. We are saying we are conformant with the current IPS composition. So we're not actually also deriving from the FHIR clinical document. But it is a sort of interesting concept. That's where the US is going. They're going to jump that and move there, and they're hoping others will do as well. And there's a number of conversations about looking to move IPS to use this as well. So it looks like the sort of direction that you might be going. But on that, I know Dushi and others have had a look at the FHIR clinical document specification. And we believe there's a few issues in this still that probably makes it not quite suitable yet for us to use. And they're going to go through an STU update. They're looking at doing an update to this shortly. And I think that's being fed by some changes that the US want to put in there. We're actually going to have a look through this in detail and develop a set of things that we think might need to change in this. I think it would be great for the community, the patient summary community here in Australia, to have a look at this. And if you do see things that you think you would like change in health, you can contact one of the co-chairs or myself and sort of suggest those changes. We can compile those up and submit that back to the working group that is working on this, to sort of say the things that we would like to see in it before we started using it. So on that, our disposition we're looking at for this is, we don't think this is a bad idea, but we don't think that we're ready for it yet. So the disposition proposed on this one is that we would consider this for future use. Essentially, we'd defer it and we'll come back to it at a later point in time. So what we're saying is the future versions of our AU Patient Summary IG will consider the FHIR Clinical Documents Implementation Guide for compatibility, adoption, and may align guidance. This version of Patient Summary has IPS and AU Core as the basis. Neither have formal relationships with the FHIR Clinical Documents IG. In future releases, an assessment on how and when to align will need to be undertaken. Ideally, this assessment will be undertaken with the IPS and or AU Core project. So we'd kind of like to align our movement with it, with AU Core and IPS. So they kind of all move together at the same time. Noting the AUPS specification recommends to implements to consider the guidance with FHIR clinical guidance specification when implementing AUPS. So I think there's a lot of good things in that IG, right, to note when you are looking to implement clinical documents. So implementers should have a look at that, and when they're looking to implement patient summary, to see where there's some useful guidance in there. But at the moment, we wouldn't look to actually derive from it. But we will put it on the backlog by consider future use. It goes on our backlog, and at an appropriate time, we will pick that up and have another look. Any questions, Marvin?
Does it diverge much from what we're doing? I mean, are there a lot of changes in it? I've not looked at it at all. So
do you want to talk to that? I know you're probably got the best knowledge there. Don't want to throw you under the bus.
No, I can just highlight some main things or comments that we want to provide. So the IG has two profiles. for bundle and composition, and it also defines a number of extensions for different participants like data enter, informant, information recipient. So we identified a number of improvements that could be made to those extensions, mainly around aligning descriptions with the actual structure of the extension and being clear on the context of use, and also potentially moving those to the FHIR extension spec where they should maybe live rather than being defined in the FHIR Clinical Documents IG. There is a number of elements that are flagged as must support, like in the composition profile. I think there's maybe 10 extensions and they're all must support. There are some pre-adoptions of composition elements that exist in R4 and R6 that are like, for example, composition status, which is mandatory in R4. R4 composition status has 4 values. R6 composition status, which is actually pre-adopted in the FHIR clinical document composition profile and is flagged as must support, has maybe 8 values, and there is no guidance on how those relate and what systems should do and both are provided and how they should handle conflicting values. So yeah, we are seeing all those must supports. The definition of must support is missing as well. There is some description of what must support means for consumers. There is nothing about producers. I'm trying to think about some of the guidance is not really clear and is using terms and language that's not used in FHIR spec or any other IGs that we've seen. So we also wanted to provide comment on that. I think that mostly summarizes it. Michael, do you remember anything else that we discussed? I'll just look at my list quickly.
Yeah, no, not really. But Brett,
So
do you
in
want
many
to jump
ways,
in?
I think many ways, I think we just think it's too early for that. It's not mature enough.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's reasonable.
Yeah. And we've also identified some defects in one of the profiles. One of the invariants is not working. Yeah. But
Okay.
yes, we do think it's too early and it needs more refinement before we can use it.
Brett?
Yeah, I was gonna back that up. From all looks, it's a bit underdone and also hasn't passed ballot yet, has it? So I think that's another thing to think about. I would really prefer that we waited till the IPS group considered this directly, and then inherited that down the track in a future version of IPS rather than going off to do this. And I think it's also just what Michael said earlier, as well. Just to say, like, if you're really interested in this spec, there's no reason why you can't implement it on your version of IPS, and actually assert stuff. But you will have to deal with all of the compatibility questions that we would have to go through probably once this is brought together. So yeah, I'd much prefer the IPS group did it as a whole, and we all looked at it and said, that this is compatible and we can definitely do IPS with clinical documents as it's published. Yeah.
Yeah. I think too, one of the things we saw is it's very much a transitional spec for transitioning from CDA documents to FHIR. And if we're doing FHIR first, some of those things like those must support and extensions and things like that. Whereas if we're not transitioning from CDA, if you are actually doing it FHIR first, then some of those obligations.
It's a little bit too because it assumes is every IPS a doc in that document paradigm is actually a good question. I'm not sure that's actually true in a kind of more dynamic patient summary generation kind of way. So yeah, I'm not even sure it's a great idea, but it's certainly something you might want to have as well as to manage your IPS documents. But yeah, I'm not sure it's always the case that you'll want to consider them clinical documents. So that's another discussion, I think, anyway.
Okay. Well, I'd like to motion that we accept this disposition, which is just consider future use. We'll defer this for now, and we'll come back to it at an appropriate time when IPS and or AU Core is looking at it.
I'm happy to second that, Marvin.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. I will launch a poll. Okay, poll should be on screen. And yeah, if you can't use the poll, feel free to vote in the chat. Okay, so we're at 80%. Thanks, Grant. Thanks, Michael. Okay, so I will do a countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. End the poll. And yep, so we have 100% affirmative. So that's 17 out of 17 plus 2 more in the chat. 0 negative and 2, and 0 abstaining. So that has resoundingly passed. Thanks so much.
And that gets me to show my favorite slide, which I nearly didn't put in because every time I do it, I jinx myself. But that is the end of ballot reconciliation for patient summary. So all the issues that were raised during ballot, we have now brought through and had voted on, which is an amazing effort considering that we went to ballot for comment in the middle of last year. We've gone through that. We jumped straight into a ballot for working standard and now looking to publish the first release of patient summary. So well done, everyone. Thanks for coming along for the ride. And I think we've got a really good product that we're going to take to our first release. Well done.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thanks, everyone.
Steve, I might just hand back to you then for
sure
closing out.
Yep, let's get that right slide up. Ballot reconciliation. Okie dokie. So I'll start sharing again. Okay, so you should see my screen there. Okay, sorry, I missed the screen. So, oh no, that's fine. Okay, excellent. So that brings us to near to the end of the meeting. And a couple of things are coming up. So our next meeting, so we have a couple of lucky ducks over at the HL7 FHIR work group meeting and the Connectathon over in the Netherlands. So I'll be back in in a fortnight to give us a report back from those events. And there's a note there about AFMM2 additional resources. Dushi, were there more that we wanted to put through the paces for that? Sorry, putting you on the spot there. Michael, do you?
Yeah, there are. So I think looking for any stuff that's come back from Rotterdam as well.
Yeah.
Any additional, I think looking at getting some additional evidence on some of the resources.
I have a question. Will we try and put that through the AU base group before publishing?
The
final version of AUPS?
When you say through AU base?
We have to get your FMM approved.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, from the FHIR work group. Yep, sorry.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Yes.
Yep, so we'd try and roll that up before we go to final publication.
Yes, absolutely that. And the QA as well.
And the QA as well, yeah.
Yep. So I think the plan here is our last meeting there on the 26th of June is where we do our QA. I think there is a FHIR work group meeting on the 1st of July that we would take all of that there, which then enables us to publish around the 8th of July. So looking at lining that up with the FHIR work group. So Steve, I think there was the question here that we were unsure whether we'd have more ballot items or not. So because there is a question around whether we cancel that next meeting on the 29th of May, given it's directly after our Sparked workshops, and that we don't have any more ballot items. We do have the meeting on the 12th of June, which enables us to do that report back to AFMM2, and any last changes that happen to come up between now and then.
Yeah.
But I think there is an open question here as to whether anyone has any issues that they know of, that they want to bring up, that they want to bring to a meeting, because that might impact whether we cancel that 29th of May meeting or hold it.
Yeah, so we've got a poll for that. So I guess, yeah, does anyone have anything that they want to bring forward? Otherwise, we might launch the poll to figure out if we want to keep the meeting or cancel that one. And then we can go into that 12th of June meeting.
Yeah, essentially, if we cancel 29th of May, everything that's 29th of May would roll into 12th of June. That still gives us an opportunity to do any last minute changes if we do happen to have anything, and do our AFMM2 and all that, and still meet our publication deadline. So I think there is an opportunity to cancel the next one unless we have a specific topic that anyone wants to bring and discuss, that we can work through.
Okay, I'm not seeing any hands, so I might just launch that poll then. So there's a poll on screen for the 29th of May to either move to some other date, cancel it, or if you don't mind either way. Brett's got a good suggestion, have a couple of weeks off and then come back with some R2 requirements. Excellent.
Well, we'll see what Brett and Danielle bring back from Rotterdam.
Heath and Danielle, yeah.
Heath. Okay,
so I'll just do a little countdown. We're almost at nearly everyone voting. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's not a formal vote, I guess. Okay, I'll end that poll. So nearly half people said, oops, sorry, share the results. Nearly half the people said cancel the meeting, and some people said they don't really care. So we didn't have an option to keep the meeting. But I guess maybe we'll let the Sparked guys decide on the meeting. What do you think, Michael?
Sorry, that was that first one. Does that change anyone's vote if the first one was keep rather than move? Everyone raise their hand if that changed it, because it probably should have said keep the meeting, because we can actually hold it. It's just a bit tight with us trying to get all that set up for that meeting. But if that doesn't change anyone's vote, I think we do have the opportunity to have a break and then come back and just do our final push to get published on the 12th. We're comfortable with that?
Yep, let's do that. Great.
Just the next slide then, I think.
Yep. So next one is the next agenda. So yep, so that'll now be finalized to 12th of June, I guess. And the agenda again will be the approval of the minutes from this meeting, any updates and news, and that Rotterdam report back, which will be quite interesting. And I guess, last opportunity for any other changes will be that meeting, because after that, then we go into, per that schedule, then we go to publication approval and the publish. So very last opportunity.
Yeah, if you have anything, you can contact co-chair, myself or another co-chair, and we'll get it on the agenda for you, and happy to just discuss it with you. So it's a good opportunity now to have a look at the IG. If there's any last minute thing that you want to have a look at, let us know.
Yep, and I guess that's a good point. So the contact details of the co-chairs are on the FHIR work group page. Sorry, the AU Core work group page. I could bring that up actually, if I can get out of this full screen thing. Hang on a second, sorry. I'll just stop sharing for a moment and I'll bring that up. I've got a few minutes.
Yep. Zulip's a good option.
Yeah.
So, but
Cool. Okay, so I'll just share this again. Okay, so if you go to the HL7 Australia Confluence AU Core work group, you've got the co-chairs over here, so you can click on people and they've got their contact details over there, and also, yeah, Zulip, as Michael said. So, all right, that brings us to the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Steve, we're on time.
Thanks, Chair.
No worries.
Bye.
Thanks for coming, everyone. I
Thanks.
will stop recording now.
Excellent.
Yeah.